Hey, Benjamin, Rogan, thank you for coming in. Both of you have just amazing, outstanding backgrounds and contribution and impact. And thank you for coming in and sharing your insights with my audience.
My
Thank
honor.
you.
Thank you.
So this is a question I'm going to ask each of you. And I'll start with Ben and then go to Rohit, and then I'll kind of change the order. And that is both of you have these amazing, outstanding histories, and you continue to make amazing contributions as well. What are two inflection points in your life that made you this wonderful person that doing outsized things today? And I'll start with Ben, and then I'll go to you, Rohit.
Well, I think there's a point in everybody's life, and when we all start out with very process oriented, very methodical. There's fifth grade, sixth grade, ninth grade, a job, and there's a point when you there's better words for it than this. That you can learn that you can fly, and you can fly. I mean, you can do unexpected things. You can do more than you thought you could do. And for me, that was in 1999 when I started my first company, and I ended up hiring people that were much more pedigreed and smarter than I was, and that to me was like, wow, this is what a great world we live in. And so 1999, starting a firm in called Yet2, an intellectual property exchange. So that would have been that's a pivotal moment of my life. If there was a second one, I think you asked for two. I think a lot of life is family, and my wife and kids are my anchors. And uh, yeah, to getting married in 2001 was a pivotal moment of my life, and having two incredible kids who are my closest confidants today is maybe a second point.
So that's really amazing. You're right. You've got this history. You're an engineer from Tufts of mechanical engineering. And then it's really this co-founder of Yeti2 that we're Yet2 that included this part of a substantive kind of foundation in your life about open innovation, technology scouting, patent healing, and you're president from 1999 to 2016. And you got some great people support you, right? Siemens, Bayer, et cetera. And then your family, excuse me, as you mentioned, and that's another sort of pivotal moment shaping and probably keeping you online as well, right?
That's it. Yes.
Okay, so Rohit, how about yourself? What are those two magic moments in your life?
I'd say apart from the family ones of my kids being born, which you kind of those are like personal milestone moments because becoming a dad is a big deal, right? But I would say similar timing to Ben, coincidentally. It was right around 1999 that I had recently graduated from college, and I wanted to have an international career, and I didn't really have any connections or anything. So I decided that I was going to pick up and move to Australia, not knowing anybody and not having a job, and just try and make it. And that was my kind of big risk in the moment, to get a working visa. So I worked waiting tables for 9 months in DC, made some money. So I had enough money to actually go and live for, I calculated approximately, like with the exchange rate, I could approximately live for 5 weeks on the money that I made if I bought a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter and used that throughout the day, and then had one big Chinese buffet dinner every day for like $8. I could make it. And so that was my first big moment. And I got a break because I landed a 3-week short-term job. And it was not based on something I'd studied in school, but based on me taking a week at some point over the summer when I was 22 to teach myself HTML. And at that time, that was an in-demand skill set. And so I had a job interview, and it was probably the shortest job interview I had. And the guy said, did you code your website yourself? And this was before kind of WordPress and all this stuff where we could get it done for us. And I said, yeah, I did it by myself. And he said, okay, you're hired for 3 weeks. And that job turned into a job permanently. And then I got my start in advertising, and that sort of sparked my career. So that was like my first big inflection moment, I think. And the second was getting my first book deal, which was in 2007. And it was right around the time that my younger son was born. And all of a sudden, when I had this book deal, I mean, I guess I could say I had to wait to get the book out, but I felt like I'm an author now. And that was a different personality professionally for me, because now I was going to be published. It was a major publisher, it was McGraw-Hill. So I had all this validation coming in, and that really started the rest of my career, becoming an entrepreneur, working for myself, becoming a professional speaker, writing multiple books, and now, leading to this one that Ben and I have written together.
That's really interesting. That, of course, you did the right thing. You talk about your family, right? Your kids. You want to keep peace at home and make sure everybody.
Oh, I doubt my boys will listen to anything I've done. So I'm pretty safe there.
Yeah. None of my kids will listen to this, but
yeah.
And then you did, like, had to do sort of regular work, sort of labor kind of work, right? You made your way to Australia, a big gamble, right? Then you get this job and you code in HTML, and it leads to a plethora of other things, including, you're a 3-time Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author, and more. And this one coming up, of course, will be a bestseller. We know that for sure, right? So,
oh yeah.
I just think those are just marvelous journeys. And now, Rohit, I'm going to go back to you. Can you go in a kind of a quick summary, some of the career milestones, but a little bit more detail? The jobs, the lessons you learned, the next job, the lesson you learned, to where you are today. And then I'll go to that.
Yeah, so I grew up in the advertising industry. And so that has a lot of stereotypes attached to it, like the bad men kind of perception. And I was obviously after that time, so there weren't people smoking cigars in offices. And I mean, that time was kind of over by the time I had made it there. But I was at Ogilvy and I was at Leo Burnett, which are two pretty major advertising agencies. And I think the biggest thing I took away from being in that fast-paced agency world is this is not an exaggeration to say that I could wake up one morning and in the morning I would be working with B2B marketers talking about how to position their latest chipset for computer manufacturers. And in the afternoon, I'd be working on an oral care campaign for toothpaste. And what it forces you to do is really switch back and forth quickly, which is one definition of multitasking, right? You're never actually doing two things at once. You're just switching back and forth really fast. And that was a skill set that was really beneficial in the world of advertising. And I think I really learned that. So that was a big developing skill for me that I use all the time now, because in addition to kind of doing the speaking and all the other things with the Non-Obvious company, I own a book publishing company where we work with lots of different authors. And so we're controlling the publishing. We're publishing Non-Obvious Thinking, which is our book, but also we have 100 other authors. And so I'm always dealing with different topics, different types of books, different people, different goals. And it doesn't bother or overwhelm me in the way that it might for other people who struggle to work in that way, people who just need to focus on one thing. And that's a great way to work too. It's just not my personality. And I think I really discovered that about myself in that world of advertising.
That's really interesting. Like Ogilvy and Leo Burnett, I mean, they're really, really famous. So you got to understand things like global brands and human behavior and marketing and storytelling, but amongst diverse groups, right?
Yeah.
Here and here, like the whole. And that kind of ties into this Christensen idea of the innovator's DNA, right? Question, observing, experiment, associating, networking. And the broader, the more diverse you kind of switch your brain, it just helps in innovation and creative thinking, right? So you're kind of like the epitome of that in your authors that you have in your publishing company. So I can see this sort of combination, aggregation of all these skills to make this ultimate best-selling author. Okay, Ben, it's your turn.
Well, I'm just building on what Rohit said. We all came of age, and I'm guessing, Stephen, you're something similarly aged here. We came of age at a really interesting time in history when there's so much less friction between capital and ideas and markets. We kind of moved from an atom age to an electron age, if you will. And really interesting ramifications of that. Bill Gates, and I can't remember the exact title of the book he wrote must have been 2001, something like that, something along the lines of Business at the Speed of Thought. And there is, because of the time frame we're in, things can happen more quickly. As Rohit mentioned, he's working on toothpaste in the morning and B2B marketplaces in the afternoon. um, if somebody has something intellectually to offer, it's and a work ethic. Man, this is an interesting world, and maybe less so for people that don't. But anyway, I think it's an interesting maybe observation about what the time we're all living in, and I think it's about to happen again with quantum computing and AI. And I'm still wrestling with the ramifications of those things. But for me, I mean, I joined at what was the long time ago my family business, DuPont, which I loved every minute of it. I was there for 13 years. And I had a really interesting kind of a set of jobs there, starting out working rotating shifts at a plant site. I was in Elgin, South Carolina, in the middle of nowhere, and then moving through research and marketing and sales, and it couldn't have been a more interesting opportunity. But I did learn that big companies are too tenure based for me, and I like being out as an entrepreneur. I like the speed and the thought in the broader economy is absolutely fascinating to me, and it's a place that I want to work in. I don't know if that answers your question, Stephen, but it's maybe raising some broader topics here.
I mean, I can see the arc, right? I mean, you graduate with your degree in mechanical engineering from Tufts, and then you work for DuPont, your kind of your family business, and it's global materials, science, chemical, and agricultural, and et cetera.
Yeah.
And you work in different business units, but you have to kind of work at the grass level, right? In automotive, fiber, specialty chemical engineering, and all of it. And then you decide, wow, I got to start this company yet too. And it's all about open innovation and creative thinking. And then you start a successful venture capital company, right? So Chartline making investments, core industries, making more efficient, et cetera. So how did you two come together, right? Because in a way, your backgrounds are different, and then there's similarities because you're very inclusive, you're broad thinkers, you got big visions, you want to make the world better. And maybe I'll go back to Rohit. How did you meet?
Yeah, we met through our shared belief in a philosophy that we didn't realize each other had, which is non-obvious thinking. And the reason I say that is because Ben, for the last 20 years, I believe, has been hosting his non-obvious dinner, and that's what it was called. And he brings together an amazing group of people and asks them to share their big non-obvious idea to change the world at dinner. And it's a little bit gamified in competition, and people try and have the winning idea. And it's really an amazing gathering, and one that I've actually never been to, but I'm going to the next one, which is finally.
Yes, in September.
But yeah, in September. But during that time, I had been building a brand around what I was calling non-obvious thinking, and it started for me in 2011 when I wrote a trend report that went viral about the future. And so every year since then, I wrote a new version of this book that I called Non-Obvious, and the last version of it came out in 2020 called Non-Obvious Megatrends, and it was all about the future. But along the way to writing about the future and being a futurist, I realized I was really teaching people how to think about seeing non-obvious things. And the outcome of that for me was, if you can see these non-obvious patterns, you can anticipate what's coming, therefore you can predict the future. But I realized that really what it was about was trying to put this philosophy out into the world, that we just need more non-obvious thinkers. We need more open-minded people. We need more people who are able to see the things that others just walk right by. Especially now in a world where we just don't know what to trust. There's misinformation, there's political division. I mean, I name any kind of major issue in the world, and I could probably link it back to a lack of non-obvious thinking that's fueling it. And so we came together because we both had been talking about this non-obvious idea, and we thought, well, why not put our perspectives together? Ben having built a community around non-obvious thinking, and me kind of doing the thought leader path to say, this is how I think, and trying to be an educator to teach people how to think that way. And those were the perspectives we put together in the book. And it really, I think it worked better than either of us thought it would. So that's the good news.
I mean, Rohit really had spent a lot more time thinking about a structure of the process. And for me, it was like when you're thirsty and you drink a cold glass of water. I mean, it was really refreshing to see somebody who'd broken it down to its component pieces. So it really made a framework for a book super easy. And we had some smart people help us, and the whole thing came together pretty painlessly, I think, surprisingly easily from my perspective.
Yeah, so let's kind of unpack this a bit, because you both are on parallel tracks, right? Not obvious thinking. So that's quite remarkable. So there's got to be, or maybe do you think, and we'll address this maybe a little bit deeper. There's kind of a synchronicity, a harmony of the universe where these parallel track thinkings, and there's quantum entanglement between your two thinking patterns, and somehow you coalesce and you aggregate. So I love this idea that you started a company, this non-obvious company. You have Idea Press publishing. You have non-obvious authors, Rohit, and then you're on the road giving keynotes, like non-boring keynotes because they're not obvious, right?
Yeah.
Doing workshops in all of these countries, and you've done it for the World Bank and NASA and Intel and LinkedIn, et cetera. I mean, Disney, Univision, you name it, hundreds of well-known organizations, because that's the foundation for catalytic thinking, right? And to survival. If you look at some of these companies have been around for like decades, and now they're like, they're small, and they shouldn't have been, right? So
yeah, it's I mean, they all kind of want, whether they're small or they're large, they all kind of want the same thing, right? They don't want people to just show up and do what they did yesterday. They want innovation, they want creativity, and whether it's my work with some of these huge brands or startups and entrepreneurs, I mean, they're all sort of hoping for that same outcome.
So Ben, there's this parallel track, and like Roy had to say, you've been doing this for 20 years. What inspired you to host this dinner? It's a private dinner, so when people come to pick you, say, "Can I go to this dinner?"
Yeah. I mean, reach out to me. I'd love to. I'm always struggling to. I want to make the a group not just a bunch of Ben's friends, but expand it a little bit. And we've hosted them all over the world, all over the country. Excuse me. The Sand Hill Road a bunch of times. Cincinnati, Miami, of course, Wilmington, Delaware. We just hosted one in Chicago. So really, it's a question. I think it's a key question to ask people, and I particularly love asking young people this. I think older we get a little more set in our ways, and it's interesting to me the panic phone calls I'll get 2 days before or a day before the event, going, I can't think of any non-obvious idea. Says a guy who's might win a Nobel Prize in something, and it's like that's an absurd thing. Of course, you can ask your high school kids to come up with non-obvious ideas. They are terrific at it, and I think one of the reasons that startups are founded by more often than not young people is that they can think in a non-obvious way, and as we get older a little bit, we get set in our ways. So I started asking this really came up with the basic question of, how do you think the world could change the next few years that's not obvious? And it's a tough question to answer, right? You can't say there's going to be political dysfunction in Washington or computers are going to get faster. Those are kind of obvious outcomes. And there are a bunch of ways to think about it and break it down, and that's what Rohit has done particularly well, is break these questions down into its component parts and think through each of those pieces. And I think it's a really interesting question. And when what I love, and when I invite people to the dinners, I get a lot of folks that go back, well, let me ask my work group, let me ask my family or bowling league what to help me wrestle with this problem. And that gets that exercise of asking your colleagues and friends, how could the world change in a way that no one else is thinking about, really it's a transformational process. And I think great startups will come from it, but I think more than anything, it makes us all more healthy contributors to society and to the economy.
I mean, you brought this up earlier. You go to your 10-year-old kids or 13-year-olds, yes, and they have a lot of ideas, right? It's almost like we're bred not to think and conform. So I love this non-traditional ways of injecting ideas, and you created kind of like a system to codify it, maybe through these dinners. And then Rohit, you've been doing this for your company and then you come together and say, you know what, we're going to do this together. So who came up with the idea of the book? Yeah, or was it sort of you just converged on this idea of the book?
Yeah, I can't actually remember. I might in college have been voted least likely to read a book, much less write one. So when so it might have been Rohit. I don't actually remember, but it was a quick decision. It was one of these Reese's peanut butter cup moments where the chocolate and the peanut butter mix, and you go, "Wow, this really tastes good." Look, we're losing you, Rohit. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I had some noise outside. Yeah, I think it was this idea that we had to do something together, and that old disparaging comment about if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, if you're a writer, every solution is a book. So, I mean, I think that was my natural place to go. Like, okay, we should collaborate on something. Well, it should be a book, of course. Like, what else would it be, right? If you ask Ben, he'd be like, maybe we should have a startup together. We'd be making a lot more money. So maybe we should have gone his direction instead of a book. But yeah, it was really this combination of our perspectives that I think really started to work. And for me, this idea that we could introduce a big idea, which is non-obvious thinking, but make it really actionable for people, right? So like Ben mentioned, finding great ideas from kids, right? So you could ask your kids, like, what's your big idea? Or you could just watch what they do and notice something that is so foreign in concept. Like I remember I was doing this around writing one of the editions of Non-Obvious a couple of years ago. And I was talking to my son, and he was about 15 years old. And I looked at his Instagram, and he had 3 pictures on it. And he'd been on Instagram for, I don't know, 2 years. I mean, longer than I had. And I'm like, in 2 years, like, you just have these 3? And what about that one that we took on vacation? He's like, oh, I deleted it. I'm like, you deleted it? He's like, yeah, I posted it for a while and then I deleted it. I'm like, wait, so you don't use your Instagram like a photo album the way I do? Like where I just have everything so I can go back 10 years and be like, oh, I remember that trip I took to Russia and like, look at that amazing picture of the Kremlin. Like, he's like, no, I didn't need it. I posted it for a while and it disappeared, right? I deleted it. And all of a sudden I started realizing that this permanence of these things that we put on social media that I sort of grew up with as a mentality doesn't exist for a certain generation. I mean, they're sharing messages that disappear, that explode, that you can only look at once. And I have an anxiety. I'm like, wait, what if I want to see it again? Like, that was a great picture, like, right? But that's not the same mentality that they have. And so it wasn't something that I asked him, like, I didn't go in and say, what do you do differently from me? Because I don't know if he would come up with that. I just watched what they were doing and I asked about it. And I think we all, whether you have kids or not, we all have the opportunity to do that. Notice something that we think is unusual and then ask about it. And I don't think enough people do that in their daily routines. And so there's an example of something where that's not obvious thinking, but it's also super practical. I mean, you could go and do that tomorrow or like right after listening to this show, and it could have an impact on your day or on your life.
I mean, one of the collaborations we had, I've had a little bit, and who ultimately wrote I guess they're now called blurbs of learning the language, but is Saul Kahn, who founder of the Khan Academy, who said some really nice things about this book, and I got to know Saul's team a little bit. You know, he has this philosophy of a non-obvious idea of switching how education's taught, right? His theory is maybe the lecture should happen at home when you don't ask a lot of questions, and maybe the homework should happen at school. And I began wrestling with that idea, and I helped him in the state of Delaware a little bit, and maybe extrapolated that forward, that maybe education in the future, back to Rohit's example with his son, maybe a lot of education will be curiosity led. And maybe there won't be quite all this linear structure, and be a little more non-obvious and a little more curiosity led. I think that's going to be certainly an exciting outcome of the book to me, is these kinds of tools that we talk through as to ways to help you think better and come up with more non-obvious ideas. Because as Rohit said at the beginning of this, the non-obvious ideas are really the ones that change the world, right?
Ben, it's kind of contrary to your mechanical engineering education.
No, but you're right. We are taught in education. It's a very linear process. And there are some people that just don't think that way. I've never been a super linear thinker. I'm sensing Rohit is somewhat similar. And I think the idea, I mean, there's a theory in Silicon Valley that the best startups come from people on the spectrum or people with dyslexia. I think there's something to that.
Yeah, I call it dendritic thinking. It's a sort of, or sort of a dendritic mass network matrix mentality, right? So your brains could go anywhere. We have about 80 to 100 billion neurons, and I estimate now maybe 250 trillion connections. That if you go into that diverse universal network, all sorts of ideas get generated. And you make sure you don't squash them, right? And both of you have independently found mechanisms and ways and frameworks to make sure that we can capture this and then do something with it. And so, can you walk through some of the chapters of the book, and maybe we'll go back to Rohit and then to Ben, where you can talk about some of the main sort of lessons and chapters, and then of course we want to encourage the audience to actually, go all in, right, or lean in on this book. So,
yeah. Ben, do you want me to jump in?
Yeah. I mean, Rohit started with this framework of SIFT, which I think is really interesting, and then each of those kind of had components. So, yeah, Rohit, why don't you tee it off, and I'll chime in for color.
Yeah. So, it's got 4 elements, which are an acronym, and the acronym is SIFT. And if you know the meaning of the word, or even if you've kind of heard it from like sifting for gold, right, which was kind of the thing back in the day at a certain time, it's this idea of isolating the things that are most meaningful and paying attention to those things. And the acronym stood for creating space, finding insights, having focus, and then finding the twist, something that makes it non-obvious. And so the way the book's structured is that that's the framework, and it's got 4 pieces. And under each one of those are 6 chapters that are each sort of lessons or tips on how to do that. So, creating space, for example, you might start with, and we very intentionally had the first chapter of the book be all about breathing, because if you can shift the way you breathe and take longer breaths instead of shallower breaths, you can transform the way that you're intentional about approaching everything else in your life. And so it seems like a rather obvious place to start. I mean, we all know how to breathe, right? But one of the ideas that expert researchers have found is that most of us are breathing wrong. We're not breathing in an optimal way. And as soon as you say that to someone, like even someone listening right now, they're immediately more conscious of their breathing. It's sort of like when you tell someone how bad slouching is, and all of a sudden they start sitting up a little straighter, right? Because like it's in their brain, they're like, oh, wait, am I doing that? Right? So sometimes, even though we know that, right? If I told you, has anyone ever told you that slouching is bad? You're like, of course I've heard that. But we forget. And then someone tells us and we're like, oh, wait, okay, now I'm like a little more intense, like all of us on video, like we're all standing up a little straighter right now just because I said that, right? So sometimes it's what we need in a book. And so we have some of that, and then some of these tips that you haven't heard before.
Yeah, I mean, and frequently the best one of the things that's been near and dear to my heart is some of the best ideas don't come from the experts. I mean, and just examples we all know. Jeff Bezos was not a bookstore owner or a logistics expert, right? He just actually, if you go back and listen to his early talks, he said, I saw the internet was growing and I wanted to have a role, and books seemed to be the best way to do that. I mean, that's a great example of kind of essentially a non-expert understanding how the rules are going to change and adapting and building a company that would change the world. If you go through and look at, Mark Zuckerberg was not the most, so matter of fact, to the contrary, he was almost antisocial at Harvard, right? And if you look, here's a guy who founds the social network to essentially solve a problem that he might have had. So I think, but he wasn't an expert in these things. He's not, trained in these things. A lot of the really innovative ideas come from non-experts who just go, hey, I noticed this happening and this happening. And what if they both happen, that's going to change the set of rules. And boy, this industry or that industry is going to be transformed. And when I remember reading, we would edit pieces and send them back to each other. When Rohit was mentioning that, I thought, gee, I mean, we're reaching a very similar conclusion from a very different place.
So are you going to then have a website where you can do sort of meta sifting? In other words, where you can do the space, insights, or framing or framework and twist? and people can share ideas, and maybe you could do popularity votes or maybe non-popular votes.
That's a good idea. We should start a venture and produce something like that. I think we've found things like that. We haven't really pioneered something on our own, but maybe we should. Like, you're giving us an idea here.
But I mean, to build on that, one of the things I've been fascinated by, of course, we're in a really unusual political time right now, and full disclosure, I'm probably right-leaning, Rohit's probably left-leaning, but that's what makes the world a great place, right? Is when people with different political attitudes can work closely together. One of the things I'm following closely are the Iowa electronic markets on political campaigns. I don't know if you guys are aware of them or see them, but there's a betting market. I think if you get an email address, you get a fictitious dollar, and you can parse that dollar out on candidates and follow them up or down. And you can actually buy shares in JFK Jr. and sell shares in Donald Trump. And so there's this very interesting market that's progressing. I think it's a great predictor. And one would think, what if one had an electronic market for ideas?
You know, in this electronic market for ideas based on your book, right? And the Swift idea, you can actually segment it to see which ones, like if you're under 10, or if you're in your teens, if you're post 20, if you're over 50, I'll bet you there's going to be different in terms of what you think are great ideas. And it'd be interesting to track that over time.
I mean, yeah, you know what's interesting, and we have seen this in some of the early readers, is you tell them an idea of a book like this about non-obvious thinking, and because of what they do, their first thought will be, oh, I'm going to be able to have better, bigger ideas, right? And then you go to a different group and they say, well, actually what non-obvious thinking is going to help me do is live a better life. I mean, I'm not trying to come up with, some people will say, I'm not trying to come up with an idea for the next big company. I'm not trying to have this end game of coming up with something that'll make me a lot of money. What I'm trying to do is actually understand the world around me a little bit better, to communicate with the people around me a little bit better, to just be a little bit smarter, maybe be a little bit happier too. And what's fascinating is that this message can go across those dimensions. And that's not very common in a book. And I read a lot of books. I mean, I host an entire book awards program where I get 800 books that were published every year sent to myself and my team to evaluate. And you have big idea books that are all about like coming up with your big idea. And then you have mindset books, which are like shift your mindset. And then you have habit books, which are change your habits to live better. And this book goes across those. And I'm really proud of that. Like, I think that what it means is that it's flexible for a lot of people to get what they need from it.
I realize you could inject this idea in your book as a centerpiece or foundation of catalytic thinking, this non-obvious thinking, into communities like IEEE, which is the world's largest engineering organization. And we have an entrepreneurship program. I'm embedded in it. I'll mention it to the chair. And
yeah.
I'm actually chairing the ACM equivalent right now, and we're the world's largest computer science organization. And then I'm also chairing within this federation of tech organizations. And I'm chairing within a YPO community and advisory board. I'm just thinking injecting this idea to different communities. But if you had this website, then they have an ability to participate. The interesting thing is with our IEEE and ACM, our audience is 4 million, right? So
it's huge. That's huge. Yeah. No, and I love that overlap. I mean, it really is great, because I think what happens for a lot of us is the higher profile we get and the more expertise we get, the more we double down on that expertise and read the things that fit into that to make us even better or even smarter in it, right? And it's sort of the sports team analogy. Like when you have a kicker on your football team, like you don't need him to practice throwing. Like you want him to be the best kicker he can possibly be. And that works in sports because we have specialists, but in business, oftentimes we feel limited by that. And we feel limited by the thing that's on our business card. And I think that a book like this gives all of us permission to be just a little bit bigger thinkers. And maybe it leads to someone completely shifting what they do, right? And that's possible, but that's not the intention, right? The intention is to just be better at what you're doing, not by doubling down on the things you already know, but to be more open-minded, to find lessons and ideas from other industries that might relate to your industry, and look at some success stories of people who've been able to do that and what you could learn from that. And that was really, I think, a deep part of what Ben and I wanted to put out into the world, because the more people that read this and adopt this mindset, the better world I think we'll be able to live in. So there's a selfish motivation here too, right? I want a world where there's more open-minded people, where there's people who can disagree with me but not hate my guts at the same time. I think that's just a better world for all of us. Like, nobody wants to wake up feeling outraged every morning. That's not a positive feeling. Like, we want to actually wake up and kind of be happy with the state of the world, and a lot of people aren't, and for good reason. And so I think if we could get there, that would just be a better thing.
And you said earlier, Rohit, that people that are a little more non-obvious are happier. I agree with that, and I think I don't know if there's any academic research on that. I've read some books on happiness. Ted Leonesis wrote a great one titled Happiness, another DC-based author, a little bit interesting guy. And I do think people that are curious are happier. So maybe it makes a more egalitarian world that's a happier world and a better world.
There is science actually around that being one of the dimensions. I mean, the biggest dimension is obviously connection with others around you. As an element of happiness, but curiosity in our lives is another piece of it.
Yeah, and they used to think that the happiness set point was fixed, and then they realized that it's not. You could actually alter the happiness set point, and just by studying monks, right? I'm just kind of trying to co-create with you live and kind of brainstorming. I'm embedded in this thing called AA for Good, and our audience reaches 3.5 billion. It'd be interesting to do a live non-obvious, based on your book, hack, a live hack to this program. We have the Sustainability Conference. I'm actually speaking at GTEx in Dubai in October, and there's 200,000 participating. I got to mention, it's a tour. No, the book's released, right?
No, it's coming out in early September, so the timing's actually perfect. Yeah. And that would be great. We have a bunch of international plans. Like, we're going to be hitting Australia, Singapore, Frankfurt, in Germany, and for the book fair. So it is going to be globally available, and we're working on multiple translation deals. Not Arabic yet, but we're hoping to have it. We already have several in the bag. So
what if I suggested to the organizers, because I'm supporting them with speakers and ideas, if they're willing to administer a live hack, non-obvious, based on your book hack, where people can co-create live.
I mean, it'd be interesting. It'd be a really interesting idea, and I think the output would be fun.
Yeah, it'd be fun. Yeah, I'm doing another with the World IT Systems Alliance, which represents 90%, tech organization I'm keynoting. But I can suggest to the organizers again, maybe we could do a live hack. I'm doing another one.
That'd be a lot of fun. I mean, one of the things we are planning right now is ways that we can, as authors of this book that's coming out, support multiple hackathons that are happening on college campuses across the US, and encourage them to come up with non-obvious solutions and non-obvious ideas. So I love this concept of putting that challenge out there, saying, hey, here's a framework. What can you come up with? And then through access that we have, maybe we get it in front of the people who could make it happen, people who could fund it, people who could support it, right? Media. I mean, we have a lot of connections in those different worlds.
Yeah, there's this youth conference, we're keynoting again, but I definitely could suggest this idea to them. It's a global youth conference, and it's for kind of senior college or college, and maybe it's senior high schoolers kind of thing, and a very innovation focused, and they would love this idea. I'll pitch it if you want me to. I could pitch it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sounds great. Yeah, and we're happy to get books out to any of them. So we have the early editions now, which that's the one that Ben's been holding. So that's the media version of it. So we have those that we're sending out to early media, and there's been a lot of buzz, and we're just, the endorsements as the blurbs, as Ben mentioned, are really rolling in. I think we've got 25 or more now, and they're still we're still adding to them. So yeah, there's been a lot of great early momentum around the book.
So Ben, can you mention some of these endorsements? I think they're amazing because I saw an email you had these. I was saying, wow,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Sal Khan. We've got yeah. Go ahead, Ben.
Well, Adam Grant, who we've got to know a little bit, and I mean, most of these really credible people, as you for understandable reasons, don't want to give an endorsement without reading the book. So you've got to get an early copy to read. But Adam Grant wrote a really wonderful blurber. Saul Khan, founder of the Khan Academy, which is talk about a non-obvious company and solution is really transformational. Tony Robbins, who I got to know a little bit, is a wonderful guy. Chris Geissens, the CEO of Wawa, hard to find a more impressive company than that one. Daniel Pink, who I don't know very well, but is a friend of Rohit's, I think. And
yeah, and he's based in DC, and we have some amazing. I mean, it's not just men either. We have an amazing roster of female endorsers too. So Pam Slim, Dory Clark, Erica Doan, Dolly Chog. I mean, really, really amazing across the board. So diverse, different backgrounds, different skill sets, different expertises. And we also did something pretty unique that I have not seen anyone do, which is we went out to our list of early readers and we challenged them to write a one-word review. And we said the best one that we get, we will put on the back cover of the book, no matter who it comes from. So totally democratically, well, not democratic because we didn't have a vote, but, open to anyone, I should say, is the version of this. And the winner was a guy named Adrian Tennant, who had been reading my newsletter for a long time. And his one-word review was sagacious, which is a word, if you're not familiar with it.
It's a great word because I had to look it up.
It has a lot of wisdom. Yeah, we had to look it up, which is kind of what we want, right? Like, it's not like we're trying to put an SAT vocabulary test out there, but at the end of the day, like, it was a really unique and great one-word endorsement. And so we chose that and put that on the back cover. So we're doing a lot of things that are unusual, not obvious, you would expect, around the launch of the book. And those are really working too, because they're capturing people's attention and they're getting them to engage with the book.
How about the Dalai Lama or something? Or is that,
well, Ben, you were going to go to the team of Bhutan, right?
The king of Bhutan is still looking at it, and I was in Bhutan a year ago, and I got to meet some of the people in the government, some of his ministers, and he created and my pitch to him was the non-obvious. He created a national happiness index, and he said the way to govern a country is by happiness. And I thought, that's kind of non-obvious. And so we're still working on the king. Maybe we'll get His Royal Highness to.
We've got until September 10th. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
We're working on him.
Quantinium is really the most advanced quantum computer. Maybe you can give that as a challenge and get the quantum computer to spit out one word or something.
Yeah.
Maybe try the 3 top AI models that are out there, especially the one that's still under wraps of OpenAI that perhaps can do a little bit more reasoning and get it to. I know. I just love the idea, and it's just endless, right? Where you can.
Right.
Well, okay. So we talked about the book. We talked about the non-obvious kind of roots to it, and then the path to it, and how it's going to transform the world into better thinking and coming together. Like Ben, you said you're kind of more right-leaning, and Rohit, you're more left-leaning, and you come together to co-create on this thing, right? So, right? So
yeah, and there is that kind of, that is going to be, I think, a message that comes out because our time frame for launching the book is right around the same time frame as the election. Media cycles, as we all know, are going to be dominated by that, and yet I think at the same time there's an opportunity to get this voice that Ben and I both have, our voices out there on something that is not the same political discourses as everyone else, right? Because we're talking about collaboration. We're talking about getting along with one another without necessarily agreeing on everything. And there's actually a chapter in the book that is very anti-prebuttals. And if you are familiar with the term of prebuttals, a rebuttal in a debate is someone argues something and then you argue for the opposite and talk about why they're wrong, which is a way to have a debate. That's a proper debate. A prebuttal is when someone comes on media before an argument is made, so before a debate happens, for example, and says, here's all the reasons why what I think that guy's going to say is wrong, even though he hasn't said it yet. And, pardon my French, but that is entirely bullshit. And no one should be paying attention to that. And that's the argument in the book, that like if you encounter someone who is doing that, right, who's saying, if their sentence starts with, well, I've never tried it, but here's what I think about it, then you know that that's a prebuttal and that's not an opinion you should listen to. We should all have our opinions. We're entitled to our opinions. But if you're having an opinion on something without ever having read it or without ever having tried it, then that opinion is not worth anything to anyone. And I think that we need to call that out.
And some of the most dangerous prebuttals are the ones that are in our own heads.
Yep.
So, we're running down to our last few minutes, and, Ben, you've got 20 plus years of running this dinner. And so you must have at least one really interesting idea that came out of your.
Hundreds. We transcribed the whole thing, and Rohit and I started churning through some. We take notes on. There's some dinners that escape us a little bit, and the ideas get out, but we try to capture every idea and articulate it. And there's some extraordinary ones. Some just about the broader economy. The first time I ever heard the words the Marcellus shale field, that we've got this big energy discovery right next to a population center, which is really rare in the world, and the U.S. is going to be a net exporter of energy. I mean, it kind of blew everybody's minds. Josh Koppelman, who was a famous, in my eyes, one of the best early stage venture funds, first round capital, came up with the idea that digital exhaust is going to cure cancer. And my first question is, what the frick is digital exhaust? And he proceeded to put it all together, talk about how basically with a better understanding of each of our lifestyles, largely driven by these devices, we might be able to put patterns together that people that do this and eat this and do that are less likely to get cancer, and very kind of mind-blowing ideas. For me, the companies that make cheap things are going to acquire the companies that make the expensive ones. And the example was Tata Motors acquiring Jaguar. And if you can, make money on a $300 refrigerator and a $2,000 car, maybe you could do some things right. And so those are examples of 3 or 4 things, and I could go on for hours. My mind is blown every time I have these dinners. And what's really interesting is both they're kind of funny and they turn into a funny thing, but I think everybody's mind is expanded a little bit when they come out of these healthy conversations, and I think it's wonderful for humanity. We haven't tracked great companies that have come out of it, but I'm sure great things have come out of it.
So, Rohit, because you've been doing this for a long time as well, and you're publishing in it, you're keynoting in it in a non-obvious way, right? Your non-boring keynotes. Is there some non-obvious trends that you want to kind of throw your hat out to that you think you want to bring to the attention of the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I'll share 2. I've, like Ben, a whole roster of them. But one of them is the move towards anti-technology, analog technology, if you will. So dumb phones, as they're being called, phones that don't keep us glued to the screens all the time or just do a couple of different functions well. And if you're old enough to remember kind of starting with these dumb phones, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have social media, they didn't have amazing cameras, but you know what they did have? A battery that lasted 6 days before you had to recharge it, which sounds pretty magical today, even though that's old technology, so to speak. So there's a move towards that in many different ways, whether it's a shift towards older cars that people are getting, or listening to music on vinyl records instead of digitizing their music, playing with puzzles and crafts and things like that. Once again, like in a resurgence of bars where people can now do that. All of these are examples of that. So, I mean, I would say that's one, which is this kind of shift towards the analog, which has been written about by multiple people. And there's a great book called The Revenge of the Analog by David Sachs that really talks about this. And the second one is about AI and the trend that we had identified around it that I wrote about in my previous book, which was called The Future Normal, which came out last year. And it was all about trends for the future. Was what we called augmented creativity. And it was this idea that as we have these AI tools that can generate lots of content, generate text, generate images, generate video, the people who will ultimately benefit the most are the ones who have the creative talent to do what they do much faster. And one of the examples that I often share about that is myself as a writer and as a background. I did screenwriting for a long time. Like I studied it. I never actually wrote screenplays that got produced or anything like that because I gave it up and went into advertising before then. But I have that skill set to be able to write in that way. And when I was working on the script for a 2-minute book trailer for one of the books, uh, I know how long that would take me. If I just had a blank piece of paper and I had to come up with that, it'd probably be a good 6 or 8 hours of revising and working on it. Maybe not continuously, but that's how long it would take. When I used AI to help me come up with a first draft, then refine it, then fix it, then ultimately, once I got it to as far as it could go with ChatGPT, for example, then I downloaded it and then I started editing it on my own, the way I would typically edit something. The whole thing took me 2 hours. So now collaborating with AI as a creative partner helped me do something in a quarter of the time that it would have taken me otherwise. Now, I still had the skill set to do it. I could have done it myself. And so it's not like I put in a prompt and it just created it for me and it was done. So that's what I think people are overestimating. They're overestimating how much the AI can do for them, and they're underestimating how much it could transform the abilities of a creative professional. Because the very next question that anybody who's in a creative role would be asking is, well, if I can do what I used to do in 8 hours in 2 hours, do I now only charge my client for 2 hours? Yeah. Or do I still charge them for 8 hours? Like, how does that change the way I monetize what I do? Right? That's a different question. But the real opportunity is for us to use these things to create better outputs and to create them faster. And then the revenue model will have to shift accordingly, because you can't just take a quarter of what you used to get paid and be happy about it.
You know, I think one of the big discoveries here with these AI models, these large language models, is that from my perspective, they are capable of original thought. And if you'd survey, this is what's interesting. I mean, I thought AI would come from the bottom up, and that the high value creative output skill sets would be safe for a while. It's actually doing just the reverse. It's coming in essentially aiding, not attacking, aiding the creative occupations like writers and screenwriters and things like that. I've been stunned at that, and I'm still wrestling with what are the broader implications. And you asked some good questions there, Rohit, but I think there are 10 more in terms of what other professions can optimize this.
So, you got this non-obvious dinner coming up. You got all these non-obvious ideas being generated. Are you going to, in real time, feed it into some GPT to look at things that are divergent and things that converge, and then get it to summarize the convergence and divergent and linking ideas, things like that? Because you can slice and dice, and you can do it in. Are you doing that then?
No, it's a great question, though. Go ahead.
Yeah, we sort of did some of that when we were in the writing process. Like one of the things we did do with some of the GPTs is we took text from various techniques we were talking about, and it asked it to generate some outputs in terms of like, how would we use this? And some of those were useful for the structure of the chapters, which is each chapter of the 24 chapters has kind of an overview of what the idea is, and then it has 2 tips for how to do it. And so some of the ideas or the genesis of some of those tips actually came from collaborating with AI tools to extrapolate out, which is what you're describing. What's the opportunity here? What do I do with this? Or what's the actionable thing? So it was helpful for that. And it was also helpful, by the way, the whole book has beautiful hand-drawn illustrations. So it's quite approachable in that sense too. And figuring out like, what should we illustrate? Like we used an actual human illustrator, not AI, but you got to give an illustrator or any designer a brief. So what do you tell that illustrator to do? What's the visual that demonstrates this point that we're trying to make? And AI was really helpful for that.
And their marketing campaign, you can actually use AI to create the videos. We're down to just like a minute each, roughly, right? So I go back to Ben. This is the final question. What are your recommendations to the audience, or questions you want to leave the audience? And then I'll go to Rohit.
Yeah, so maybe one of each. I mean, I think the more we step out of our box, we all time I think tends to put a box around us, or we put it around ourselves. And I think the more we step out of that box and meet people that we wouldn't normally meet, or go to trade shows we wouldn't normally go to, or read books we wouldn't normally read, I think that will make us more productive and happier. And I think that's a good lesson on society and maybe a piece of advice for society. And then maybe a question is, what is your non-obvious idea? How do you, everybody in this planet has a unique perspective on the world. And what idea, what's your unique view? What do you think is going to happen that nobody else does? Articulate that, latch onto it, and ask questions.
And then submit it to non-obvious.com.
And submit it to non-obvious.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say the first thing is to ask yourself, what is something different I'm going to do today that I didn't do yesterday? Which is a very simple question to ask yourself. And it could be like eat something different. It could be have a different routine. It could be maybe shift the order of how you do the things that you do during your day. But whatever the answer is, when you make that sort of change or even ask yourself that sort of question, you send yourself a mental signal that says, today's not going to be like yesterday. And as soon as we send ourselves that signal, we put ourselves into a space to appreciate non-obvious ideas and non-obvious thinking much more. And so I would say that's the first and most easy technique. Anyone can ask themselves that question. You do it first thing in the morning, and then you try and live up to that throughout the way that you live your day. And at the end of the day, you might find that the new thing that you did, or at least the shifting of patterns, resulted in a totally different way of thinking. Maybe you realized something you hadn't realized before. Maybe you saw an opportunity that you didn't before. But I guarantee you that when you go back home and you go to bed that day, you will feel like you accomplished something that day that you hadn't before. And in a world where we could end up doing the same thing every day and get stuck in the same opinions and never really shift to be more open-minded and to appreciate the things that are diverse in the world, that's a great thing to do for yourself. So I would say, yeah, great. If you're trying to launch a product or a service or whatever, that's awesome. But do this for yourself. Like, do it to be better yourself.
And then maybe related to that, Rohit, I did an interview with for ACM with our Kozla, and he spends a significant amount of time reading on the outliers, right?
Yeah, he does.
Mm-hmm. So, so staying on the edge somewhat, right? So
yeah.
I really thank you both for coming in. Just that I really enjoyed this session. You're amazing thinkers. You're contributing to the impact of the world, making it a better place. Really for the benefit of all in all Earth ecosystems and innovation, and also the capital markets, you name it, it's going to have a positive impact. So really, really appreciate you coming in, both of you. So thank you so much.
Our pleasure. Great to meet. Stefan, I hope we can get you to one of our dinners. I think we've sent you an invite to the one in September, if others, but thank you for hosting us. That was a fascinating conversation.
Yes, thank you. It was great to meet you. I really appreciate it. And it was fun for Ben and I too to do one of these together.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.